When Faria's eyes opened, the morning sun had not yet risen. Darkness, thick and thick mixed in the room like milk. She lay on her cot, listening to the sounds of the quiet neighborhood outside, sometimes the barking of a dog in the distance, sometimes the subtle rustle of water falling from a tap in the neighborhood. The sound of his breathing echoed through the room. She would get up, wipe the sweat off her forehead with her hands, and quietly go to perform ablution. The water was cold, and his sleepy eyes twinkled. She was like a small mechanical device whose every move was timed. It was something she could only dream about. Occasionally, if there was anything left over for dinner, she would wrap it in her clothes and sneak out in the morning on the way to the chewing factory. But it's rarely the case. Most of the time, his stomach would be empty, with only a bitterness and a slight chew left. His house was a small room with a quad, which lacked both air and light. The walls were damp, and the smell of saline was always floating in the air. It wasn't a house. It was a shelter, a place where she would collapse from exhaustion, trying to get ready for the next day. He had no family. His parents died in childhood. There was an uncle who had given him this room and gone to Karachi himself, and now had nothing to do but to send a letter a year. Fariha was alone in the world, an island surrounded by a sea of toil and struggle. Nader Textile Mills was a large, bare-roof building, with its exterior walls riddled with black smoke. Inside there was always a rumble, the clatter of machines, and a thick web of cotton fibers floating in the air. The air was hot and hard to breathe. Fariha would sit in her designated place. In front of the sewing machine with the number 47, the machine was old, often with a complex malfunction, loosened. The needle broke or the power supply stopped. But there was no point in complaining. The man in charge of the machinery, whom everyone called Qasim Master, had only one answer. It goes on. Then there's a lot. Do you want to run a machine or make excuses? Fariha's daily target was 1,200. Tishrin Sinai. Each tusser had a specific style. Each stitch required 50 to 60 stitches. His hands were fast, but machine malfunctions and physical exhaustion killed his speed. In the afternoon, when there would be a break for an hour, Fariha would take out a piece of bread wrapped in her cloth. If he hadn't, she would have been drinking water and looking at her hands, fingers that were full of swelling and marks from the constant work. Nader Malik, the owner, was a tall man whose eyes always seemed to be busy with calculations. He would walk around the factory floor 2 or 3 times a week, his eyes on the workers' hands, not their faces. He was very punctual. Penalty of 25 rupees for delay of 1 minute. Deduction of half a day's salary for delay of 10 minutes. Fariha also once worked in a high fever, as 1/3 of the day's salary would go to the doctor's fee. Nader had another way. He would deduct the money by making various excuses while paying the salary at the end of the month. These clothes are damaged. This order is delayed. This electricity bill is high. Fariha often did not receive full wages for her hard work. She remained silent, meant to speak. She hands at work, and the hunger was knocking at the door. Her fellow women were like her, Zainab, who had 3 children and a handicapped husband. Samina, whose daughter was ill, and the cost of medicines had made her life difficult. and Khalida, who bore the burden of her brother's education. The women read each other's stories. There would be less conversation, but a look, a sigh. A little help, that was his language of compassion. She remembered that day well. The night before, he had just had tea. He was having severe dizziness and a constant throbbing in the head. He went to the factory. As he sat in front of machine number 47, he felt the air become more suffocating. In front of him were piles of clothes, blue, white, pink. The color flashed in his eyes. It was afternoon. He reached out his hand, but his fingers were numb. He tried again. Then satellites in the room were warming. The sound of the machines seemed to come from far away, like a sound coming from inside the water. He tried to put his head on the machine, but his body was not supporting him. A bright flash, then complete darkness. She felt herself on the ground, but she couldn't make a sound. There were screams and footsteps all around him. Then the faces of Zainab and Samina appeared in front of his blurred vision. There was fear in his eyes. She was trying to lift it. "Hooray, Bibi, come to your senses." But the voices were gone. Part 4. The white walls of the hospital. When Fariha's eyes opened, she found herself in a white room. There was a strong smell of medicine. His head was heavy, and there was a strange weakness throughout his body. He had a knife in his left hand. A doctor, with his name Dr. Imran written on his white coat, stood next to him and said, "You have regained consciousness." Skid. The doctor's voice was not worried. She told Fariha that she was suffering from severe malnutrition, anemia, and dehydration. The level of hemoglobin in his blood was very low. "What do you eat?" the doctor asked. Faria nodded silently. He had no power to speak. Imran took a deep breath. "I'm watching. There are women like you every day. They work, they give their all, but they save nothing for themselves. You need to rest for at least 2 weeks. And eat a regular, balanced diet. Otherwise..." He stopped talking, but his eyes said everything that words could not say. Faria closed her eyes. "It's 2 weeks." It was meant to 2 weeks, without pay. It was meant to rent, electricity, ration, money management for all. He had no savings. He knew who was going to pay for the hospital. Perhaps his companions must have gathered something together. This feeling created a sense of shame and helplessness in him. At night, when there was a slight silence in the hospital, Fariha lay in bed counting the days of her life. She had been drifting in a stream for years, without resistance, without question. But today, falling to earth, the darkness had shown him a different light. It wasn't fear, it was anger. A calm, deep, disembodied anger. She began to question herself. Was the purpose of her life just to sit in front of machine number 47 and sew clothes and sleep on a hungry stomach? Isn't his hard work worth it? He can't do anything on his own. An idea flashed in his mind. A small, dim idea, which gradually began to shine. She was discharged from the hospital 2 days later. Dr. Imran gave him some free medicines and a small note which read, "Value yourself. You're not just a worker." His companions Zainab, Samina and Khalida left him at home. They were all silent. But in their eyes was the same question that was in Fariha's heart. Now what? Fariha asked them Nam to make tea under the fact. Zainab said quietly, "But money." "We will do the work ourselves," said Fariha, her voice carrying a new firmness. "We have our own space. We're well-dressed, well-dressed. We should get the fruits of our hard work." It was as impossible as the first idea. But Fariha opened his old cupboard. He pulled out of it a small box, in which he had kept some jewelry over the years, a silver bangle from his mother, a studded necklace. It was his only possession. "Aunt, we will sell them," he said. "We need to old sewing machines, some clothes, threads. Just to start." Sami shed tears. "I don't have anything." "Give, Freya." "You have the skills," Freya said with a smile. "And your hand. This is the greatest wealth." The following week, Fariha's silver bangle and necklace were sold by an old goldsmith. The money was small, but enough to get started. They rented a corner of an old, vacant barn in the neighborhood. The place was small, the light was low, but it was their own. Zainab's husband, who used to stay in bed, made to simple wooden tables with his own hands. A young boy from the neighborhood, who had a job as an electrician, helped them fix their old machines. Kaleda's younger brothers joined hands in whitewashing the walls. It was not just the beginning of a business, but the birth of a community. He named his small workshop the Light Sewing Center. Part 6. The First Stitch. The First Hope. The first order was a simple one. An elderly woman living in the neighborhood, Umatullah, had to get her grandson's school uniform implanted in 3 places. They decided to come and see Fariha instead of the traditional tailor. Faria took off her clothes. He not only applied the grafts, but also lightly washed the starch and soaked it that it began to look like new. God was very pleased. He paid more than the prescribed fee and made them known throughout the neighborhood. The first month was very difficult. Orders come very rarely, often small tasks. But Fariha and his companions did everything with great love and honesty. If there was even a slight defect in the stitching, they would correct it and give it again. He made punctuality his motto. There was no scolding, no coercion in his workshop. She loved her job, and that hard work was reflected in every one of her stitches. Gradually, the locals realized that the fabrics woven at the Light Sewing Center are better than the factory fabrics. The work of giving a new look to the old clothes was also started there. Fariha had creative abilities. She would add a little embroidery or a new design on a simple fabric, which would make it unique. One day, there was a wedding in town. The bridegroom's sister had to quickly get her dress ready. He came to Fariha, and her team stayed up all night to create the dress, a beautiful, finely stitched gown. Everyone at the wedding praised the dress. It was a great success for them. After this success, the orders began to increase. Not only are they getting new clothes, but they're also getting new ones. Their income has increased. For the first time, Fariha bought herself a new sari, simple, yet clean. For the first time, he ate with fullness, contentedly. She didn't go to bed hungry at night, but tired. There was a new look on his face. She began to talk, and she smiled. She wasn't just alive, she was alive. Part 1. The Fall of Nader. When peace came to Fariha's life, the condition of Nader textile mills began to deteriorate. After skilled laborers like Fariha left, the quality of work began to decline. The newly recruited girls were not as skilled. And due to Nader's toughness, they did not last long. Nader began to work harder to recoup his losses. The working hours have been increased. The penalties have been increased. This caused discontent among the workers. One day, when Nader mercilessly scolded a pregnant laborer girl and cut her half pay, the workers raised their voices for the first time, protested. Nader took out 5 of them. But it wasn't a fire. The workers informed the union. It was reported in the media. As a small investigation began, it was discovered that Nader was flouting minimum wage laws, not providing facilities for a safe working environment, and even working with children. He was fined and banned. Nader's big customers, which were international brands, stopped working with him because they couldn't risk their name. The order was broken. Nader tried to run the factory with his personal wealth, but it was like pouring water on an ungrateful brother. The debt began to rise. Finally, one morning, there was a big lock on the doors of the factory. The cell was marked closed. Nader, once a powerful, arrogant man, was now helpless. His house, his car, everything was gone. His wife left him. The friends turned away. He was in a hell of his own making. Fariha was working that day on a sophisticated electric sewing machine, which she had recently bought with her own savings. This machine was much better than the old manual machines and made the work much easier. For other women were working in the factory, laughing and helping each other. It was an atmosphere of warmth and unity in contrast to the soulless atmosphere of the factory. The door opened. A cold wind came in. Faria saw the man she had dreamed of for many nights standing in front of her. But now the dream was over. Her clothes were soiled, her hair disheveled. The glint in his eyes, the pride, was gone. His hands were trembling. There was silence in the workshop. Zainab, Samina, all stopped working. His eyes were fixed on Nader. But now there was no fear in his eyes, but surprise and some enmity. Nader tried to make a sound. Nothing came out at first. Then he said, "Oh." Faria shut down the machine. Gently get up, sweep the small fibers of the fabric with your hands. His face was calm. The storm wasn't coming in. "What's the matter, Mr. Nader?" He said, "You're here." Nadia lowered her eyes. "My work has stopped. You know." "Yes," she said simply. "I know. I need some work," Nader said, his voice shaking. "I have collected some orders. It's a small number, but if you make it, it might make up for some of my loss. I'll pay you." These were the same phrases that Fariha had been hearing for years. But today the roles had changed. Faria took a slow breath. He looked at his friends. In their eyes he read many emotions: anger, satisfaction, and some longing. He looked back at Nadia. "You will be remembered, sir. One day, as I sat weakly in front of the machine, you said to me, 'If you don't want to go hungry, work harder. Women are not meant to cry. They are meant to work.'" Nader's head tilted down. His cheeks turned red. Dot. "Today," Fariha said softly, "hunger is standing at your door. And you have come to my door asking for work." There was only the sound of cars passing by. "Faria, your work." Nader nodded in surprise. "But not because you are the master, or because you are pitying you," explained Fariha. Because we know what hard work is. We know what it is to be hungry. And we know that, leaving a man to his fate. That's not our way. He pointed to his team. Here, we all decide together. Zainab nodded her head. Samina smiled and said, "We will." Khaleda said, "But there is a condition." He asked, "What's the matter?" "The first condition, the fee of our choice," said Fariha. "The price of our work." "The second condition, the quality of work will be ours, the time will be ours." "Third and final condition, here, you are a client, not an owner. You don't have the right to command anyone. If you accept it, you can start working." Nader was silent for a moment. His whole life was spent in carrying out his orders. Now, he had to accept the conditions. Taking a deep breath, he shook his head. "Okay." Faria picked up a piece of paper. "Give me your details." Nader took out some samples and clothes. They were simple orders. Some uniforms had to be made. Maybe he had nothing else. Writing down the details, Fariha wrote a receipt and made Nader sign it. "On payment delivery. Now you can go." Nader turned around and walked out without saying anything. As soon as the door closed, life returned to the workshop. Zainab said, "Why did you take his job, Fariha?" "What he did to us." Faria turned her hand to her new machine. "We are not like that. What we've created."